Hello and welcome to the Fighting Spirit Podcast. As always, I'm Jason. I'm here to bring you the fight picks for UFC Fight Night Lee versus Oliveira, taking place in Brasilia, Brazil. This is going to be a very, very interesting card. Got a lot of Brazilians on this card. Got some experienced fighters as well. This is not a debuters playground. We have some veterans in here. The Brazilian cards usually bring the action. Let's get into it. Here's the show. Alright, so we're going to kick things off like we normally do with the main event. This is where the Motown phenom Kevin Lee takes on Charles Do Bronx Oliveira. And in this one, maybe you call me crazy, but I think Kevin Lee gets it done here. He, I think, is honestly a changed man now that he is a TriStar product, and we are factoring that into the metric for his team score. Nothing against Do Bronx. He is on a 6 fight win streak. Wins over Jared Gordon, Nick Lentz, David J. Moore, Jim Miller, Gallegos, Clay Guida. This guy is submitting you, knocking you out. He's getting finishes. When I look over at Lee, it's not quite as positive a story. Granted, we got that spectacular Gregor Gillespie victory for Lee, but before that, lost to Dos Anjos, lost to Quinta. He did beat Edson Barboza, but he lost to Tony Ferguson for the time. I mean, that goes way back to 2017 at that point, but looking over his last 5 fights, he has only 2 wins and 3 losses, but he made the move to TriStar. His trainer, his coach had committed suicide. There was a lot of tragedy in Kevin Lee's life, and I think being up at TriStar, being with the genius that Faraz Sahabi is, we still have GSP up there, I think, and guys have always said Kevin Lee is a black GSP, right? He's a guy with wrestling, with cardio, with striking. He's a total package, and I think he does it against a guy like Oliveira. Oliveira, very competent fighter. Let's not mince words here. When I score these guys out, they have high metric scores. However, Lee does edge it out, and I think that's going to be because of his toolkit. I think his toolkit is just a little bit bigger than Charles Oliveira's. I think his ability to score takedowns with his wrestling background going to be a little bit better than Oliveira's, and he's no slouch at the submission game. He also has a higher striking output, and he has really, really good technical combinations, especially now that he's under Faraz Sahabi. Look how crisp he looked against Gillespie. He went out there like a man on a mission that was supremely focused, and I think that's going to be the difference here. Nothing against Charles Oliveira coming out of the shoot box camp, but it's not actually, he is now at a new gym. Let me look at this one up. Actually, never mind. I got it confused with Johnny Walker, who we'll get to in just a short bit. He also made a move recently. But anyways, getting back to shoot box, where Charles Oliveira does actually train. It's not quite TriStar. It's not quite the same talent pool. It's not quite the same level of coaching. I think that the Motown phenom, I wanted to say avenues to victory, but that's really not it. Charles Oliveira has just as many avenues to victory. I just think that Kevin Lee is going to be too good. He's going to have too many answers for Charles Oliveira's problems that he's going to throw at Lee, and I think that Lee ultimately gets it done here in Brazil, which is going to be a statement unto itself. Kevin Lee is making an argument that he is going to be one of the best 155-pounders. Keep in mind, this guy's only 27 years of age. We've been seeing him for a while, dating back, with that Tony Ferguson interim title fight that he was thrown into probably a little too early in his career, but he was on a great win streak at that point. He was on a 5-fight win streak himself, and I think when we look at it, the death of his coach, the move to TriStar, everything's playing out for Kevin Lee's career right now. I think he's the pick. I'm picking Kevin Lee in the main event. All right, in our next one here, we have a legend in Demian Maia taking on Gilbert Burns, and this is going to be a phenomenal contest. However, I think that the legend's time here has passed a little bit, and I think that he's going to be hard-pressed to take out such a hard-hitting fighter like Gilbert Burns is right now. He's a guy with very good striking. Granted, he does have submission game, but I don't think that can be a factor here right now, considering, that he's going up against Demian Maia. We have to kind of nullify the submission avenue. But when we look at his hands, his output is like 2-1 over Demian Maia. His accuracy is on par with Maia's, but he's still hitting him more for, the intervals of time. I think his output will be there. We know that he's a great point fighter. Wins over Aubin Mercier, Alexei Konchenko, and Gunnar Nelson, all via unanimous decision. He does have a rear choke in there with Mike Davis, but he's not going to submit Demian Maia. He knows that. He's not going to play that game. He's going to try to exploit the weaker striking, weaker boxing of Maia and do whatever he can not to be taken down. We know this takedown defense isn't the best in the world at about 50%, but I think that he'll be good enough to stay off of the ground with Maia. He'll be able to stick him with the jab. Granted, doesn't have any reach advantage. He'll have to be coming inside with a 1-inch reach disadvantage, but that's such a small margin. I don't think the reach will be too much of a factor here. I think it's going to be the explosiveness, the youth, the power, and I think that's what's going to get it done for Gilbert Burns. He is the pick in Brasilia. In our next matchup taking place at lightweight, we are going to have Renato Moicano take on Damir Hadzovic, I believe, the Bosnian bomber. I think I got that one right. And in this one, I think it's going to be Moicano all day. Let me talk about why a little bit. Part of it, and I haven't really mentioned it thus far, but it is something to take as a grain of salt regardless of the contest. If you are not Brazilian and you're fighting a Brazilian and it goes down to the wire, I think that you're going to end up with a Brazilian decision. We've seen this before. The Brazilians are crooked, but in a predictable way. If you end up with a bad outcome in Brazil, it's usually just going to the Brazilian. It's not something where you have to question, how are they scoring takedowns here? How are they scoring striking? Is it advanced? There's not really complicated. If it's close, it's usually the Brazilian, and that's all it comes down to. In this one, I'm giving that slight edge here to Moicano for obvious reasons, being Brazilian himself. Going back, though, just talk about it. Gilbert Burns, Demian Maia, I think that's, kind of a split down the middle. They're both Brazilian, so I don't think we can really factor either one. With the Kevin Lee fight and Charles Dvorak, I think that one's going to end ultimately in a stoppage by Lee, so I'm not too concerned when they go down to the wire in that one, but it is important just to mention that because it is definitely a factor when you go down to Brazil. I know I say I don't like the international cards, they're a little tough to predict, but generally the Brazilian cards are easy to predict if it ultimately goes to decision. So not too much of a worry here. I feel pretty confident in that Brazilian favoritism that we see down there a lot. Either way, let's get back to Moicano and Hadzovic. So Moicano, he's been fighting the best of the best, but he's been losing. Aldo, Chen Sen-jung, or Korean Zombie as he's normally referred to. But look at the wins before that, how he got there. Calvin Kattar, Cub Swanson. He is a guy that brings the heat. When I look over at Damir, he's not fighting the best of the best. Nick Hine, Mark Polo Reyes, not the worst fighters in the world. I'm not trying to say they're cans, but then he also lost to Christos Gallegos. These are some mid-tier guys. These are some up-and-comers, journeymen, that kind of thing. Moicano, he may have not reached the summit yet in his career. He's only 30 years of age, but he's fighting to get there. He's making a statement, and I think ultimately he's going to be able to defeat Damir Hadzovic here. I think that he has the skill set to get it done. I think that with his striking output, with his, I think, slightly better submission game, he just has better avenues to victory. Just bear in mind that the Bosnian bomber has 7 KOs of his 13 wins, and Renato is really much more of a points-style fighter. He has 6 submissions. He's using his striking to set up takedowns to get it to the mat on occasion, but mostly he's a point-style fighter, and I think that could be a problem for Hadzovic, who is coming in with a small 2-inch reach disadvantage of Moicano. I know it's 2 inches, it's not the biggest margin, but it could be enough here to keep that jab going, keep those combinations at distance, and defeat the fighter in Hadzovic via points. And that's kind of how I see this thing going. I think Moicano picks up a decision here. He's the pick in Brasilia. All right, I made a small mistake earlier, but we'll cover up for that right now. Johnny Walker, who's taking on Nikita Krylov in his matchup in Brasilia, is now, Johnny that is, training at TriStar. He's the one that recently switched gyms and is getting better coaching and better development in his young career. And I think that's going to be a factor here because Johnny Walker is a creative, explosive fighter that is just a killer. he gets it done early and often. Granted, he did lose to Corey Anderson. He had injured his shoulder. I don't know where that stands really still at this point. I'm hoping he's basically, at least 90% of the way there at this point, and I think that he's going to be the more likely victor here because of that explosiveness. Bear in mind, though, Krylov, very dangerous fighter. 11 KOs, 15 submissions over his 26 wins, never gone to decision. He gets submitted or he basically doesn't lose at all. He's 1 KO loss, 1 decision loss. He is a shut-the-door kind of guy, and both of these guys are really, though. For Walker, 1 decision win in his career, no decision losses. He has been knocked out 3 times and submitted once, but he's 17-4. We got to give a slight nod to experience for Krylov, but I still like Walker coming into this one. Up until his loss to Corey Anderson, he hadn't lost since 2016. I imagine by switching teams, being up there with that amazing camp, he's getting the coaching that he needs in order to develop his natural raw talent. And I think that he's going to be able to do that against Krylov and pick up a win here. I think that he's a slightly better striker just because of his dynamicism. I think his ability to explode is going to be there, and his 5-inch reach advantage is not going to hurt in this department either. If he's jumping up and throwing a flying knee or just wailing a jab across the center of the octagon to snap the head back of Krylov, I think he gets it done here. He is the pick in Brasilia. All right, this next fight comes with a bit of a grain of salt. So the majority of my metrics are picking Francisco Trinaldo in his bout against the Bull, John Makdessi. But my most successful metric, the one with the highest likelihood to predict the fights, is picking Makdessi. And that's going to be the official fight call on this podcast here. I'm going to go against the majority and go with the most successful one. Just, like I said, I'm telling you so that you know that, this may not be the most confident pick. It's definitely a grain of salt situation, but I like Makdessi in this one in my gut too. Trinaldo, great fighter. He's never been knocked out. He's, a historically very, very tough, violent guy. But Makdessi just looks really good right now, training at Rufus Sport, 9 KOs over 17 wins. And with Trinaldo at 41 years of age, I think Makdessi is the kind of guy that could be the first one to knock him out potentially. However, just bear in mind, Makdessi is on a 3-fight win streak, all via decision, and it is going to be tough to get that decision down in Brazil. So, just bear that in mind. Trinaldo, though, we've seen him, off and on. He's that kind of guy. Lost to Vic, came back, beat Dunham, lost to Alexander Hernandez, went back, beat Bobby Green. And, he's kind of all over the place. He's a 50-50 kind of guy. Didn't actually beat Kevin Lee, though, so just think about how good Trinaldo is. But at 41 years of age, where Makdessi trains, siding with the metric that's the most successful, I'm going with Makdessi here. He's the underdog in this situation, which I like. I like that the payout is good from a betting perspective. I just don't know where you want to sit on the probability because most of my metrics do pick Ronaldo. This one, I'm just going to say it, is maybe an avoid betting altogether, but the official fight pick for this show is Makdessi, and it is the most successful metric I have. It is the highest percentage of wins at right now. These things jockey back and forth the way they're set up. So anyways, just want to throw that out there. I am going with John the Bull Makdessi in this matchup. All right, so our next one is going to be a very excellent flyweight matchup, and that's going to be Jussier Formiga taking on Brandon, the baby assassin Moreno. And in this one, despite Formiga being a highly talented submission artist from Brazil, I'm going to go with Brandon Moreno here. I think that he's a more well-rounded fighter with more avenues to victory, more pathways to victory. And I think that his striking in this case is going to be on showcase here. I think that he's a much, much better striker than Formiga with nearly equal submission skills. He has 10 submissions himself. He has a reach advantage. He has a mass or frame advantage. He's a bit bigger. I like the baby assassin here. I think that he has a very good set of skills, and he beat one of the best at 125 already in Kai Kara France. Not to use MMA math, but I like where he's at right now. He's gotten back on track from his loss to Sergio Pettis and Pantoja. He's looking really good right now. Whereas when I look over at Formiga, he took a loss. He was knocked out by Benavides, and he's looking to recapture victory, but I do not think I think it's going to evade him here. I think the win is going to be elusive, and despite being in Brazil, I'm going to go with the Mexican fighter. We are picking the baby assassin in this flyweight matchup. All right, this next one here might be the easiest one to call tonight, but hey, I've been wrong calling them before like this. But Ronda Marcos, the Quiet Storm, taking on Amanda Ribas. Despite the fact that Marcos has much more experience at 10-7, she's just at 10-7. She's round about a 50-50 fighter with only 4 submissions, whereas I look over at Ribas, 3 KOs, 3 submissions. She's 8-1 overall. She doesn't have as much time, but she beat Mackenzie Dern, she beat Emily the Spitfire Whitmire, and Jennifer Gonzalez Araneda, although that was outside of the UFC. 3-fight win streak, though, looking really good right now, whereas Ronda Marcos, yeah, she did get a split decision win over Ashley Yoder, but I don't think she's going to get it done here. She has one kind of weird off win against Angela Hill, which I don't think would happen again today. I don't think Angela Hill will get caught like that. I think she's gotten better, and I don't think Ronda Marcos gets it done. Maybe Ronda's turned tide and she's, better than her record and her recent losses kind of state she is. But I got to go with Ribas here. She's in Brazil. She's taking on a Canadian fighter. If this thing does go to decision, like it definitely could, Marcos 6 decisions over 10 wins, I think it goes to Ribas. Also, the skill set goes to Ribas as well. She has the better hands, better takedowns, better submission game. She has a reach advantage as well. Let's not forget about that. She's the better fighter here. She's basically a lock. And the odds say that she's heavily as a favorite. So not a lot of money to make on her, but Amanda Ribas is the pick. All right, same situation as the Johnny Walker fight here. We have Elizeu dos Santos taking out Alexei Kunchenko. And in this one, the most successful metric picks Dos Santos, and all the other ones pick Kunchenko. But I'm going to go with the Brazilian fighter here. I think that he gets it done. He's also Brazilian, which certainly helps. Kunchenko, he looks really good on paper. He's 20-1, 13 KOs over, 1 submission over his 20 wins. But he, lost to Gilbert Burns in the last outing, and he actually hasn't picked up any knockouts in the UFC. As they've raised the talent pool in this guy, he's going to decision and also not looking like the talented knockout artist that he seemed to be coming into the UFC. When I look over at Dos Santos, yes, he did lose to Li Jingliang. However, before that, Curtis Melander, rear naked choke, Luigi Valderrami, KO flying knee, Sean Strickland, KO wheel kick. He's a very dynamic fighter. Before that, he had decision victories. He was on a 7-fight 7-fight win streak up until his loss to Lee, and I think that Capoeira Santos is an amazing fighter that's going to be able to beat kind of a paper champion in Kunchenko. Yes, he only has one loss. It was his, last UFC fight, and I just don't know if the talent pool in the UFC is that much deeper than it is in M1, and so I think we have a situation where maybe Kunchenko was just fighting cans. We haven't seen him perform like he did over at M1 and get the great stoppages. So I'm going with the Brazilian fighter in Brazil, Elizeu Zaleski dos Santos, Capoeira Santos, we call him here too. He is the pick in this contest. All right, in our next matchup taking place at bantamweight, we're going to have Hani Yaya taking on Enrique Barzola. So in this one here, as much as, I kind of like Hani here, his numbers just don't shake out. Barzola looks like the much better fighter. His striking is phenomenal. His takedowns are phenomenal. His takedown defense is also a lot better. Yaya's coming in with only 22% takedown defense. Granted, he does rely a lot in his submission game, so I think it's one of those cases where he doesn't care about being taken down, so he just kind of goes with the flow with 20 submissions over 26 wins and no KOs. Barzola, much more of a decision fighter, although he does have 4 KOs and 4 submissions over his 16 wins, but he has 8 decisions overall. And he's kind of struggled a little bit here, losing some unanimous decisions, winning a split decision, but I think he'll have enough to get it done against Hani Yaya. Bear in mind, though, Brazilian in Brazil, if this guy's a heavy decision fighter, we could definitely see this potentially not go the way of Barzola, but I like him here. I think he's the better fighter, and I think he will prove himself to win this contest, assuming he doesn't get some limb or his neck cranked on in this contest. Not my most confident pick, but we are going with Enrique Barzola in this matchup. All right, we have a few more fights here. The last truly crunch fight that I can speak to at this time, though, is going to be Veronica Macedo and Bea Malecki. So not a whole lot to say here. In this one, Bea Malecki is very, very green in her contest. She's 3-0, but that's just 3 fights. And she's taking on Veronica Macedo, who's a Venezuelan fighter at 6-3. In this one, I think Malecki's just going to be too big. I think she's going to be too powerful, and she has shown a high fight IQ with the ability to shut the door. She's never let it go to decision. She even got a TKO in her amateur debut, which she also won. So I like Bea here, whereas we've seen Macedo struggle again and again. She did beat Polyana Viana, but before that, 3 losses in a row coming into the UFC. Ashley Evans-Smith, Andrew Lee, and Jillian Robertson. In this, I think Bea gets it done. I think despite her inexperience, she looks like the much better fighter, and I think we're going to see the second UFC win for Malecki. In the last 2 contests here, I don't have them fully crunched here. We're still missing a little bit of data. But in the Mayra Bueno Silva versus Marna Moroz contest, we are taking Mayra Silva in that one. I think she's the little bit better fighter, even though the numbers here are a little bit weak for both of them. There's just not a whole lot of information to go off of for this ladies flyweight matchup. We only have the 1 fight in the UFC for Mayra Silva, but her numbers do seem to shake out a little bit better when we take everything into consideration. She's also coming in undefeated at 6-0. And then the last one, Bruno Silva and David Dvorak. This is actually a debuting fight, and it's taking place at flyweight. And this one, we're going with David Dvorak. And this one, I think he's going to be a little bit better fighter. He has a little bit more experience, and I think he'll be able to get it done. But bear in mind, the information isn't all there for these. I'm doing it off of the available information that I have. So that is the fight card for UFC Fight Night, Lee versus Oliveira. Let's go over them one more time. We have Lee, Burns, Moicano, Walker, Makdessi, Moreno, Ribas, Dos Santos, Barzola, Malecki, Mayra Silva, and then David Dvorak to round things out. I also want to throw out there that we are going with the most successful metric, not the one that has, not the other metrics that have the majority picking decision. So in that one, that would be the Makdessi pick and the Dos Santos pick. Both of those are picked from the most successful metric, not the majority of them. So that pretty much brings us to the end of the show here. I want to thank you for listening. I also want to let you know that, if you're listening to this right now, please subscribe, like the show on YouTube. Go ahead and find us out on Spotify, share with your friends, and also down in the description, there is our Patreon there as well. We were 3-1 last week. We had some amazing picks. We're definitely in the money. I'm hoping to keep things rolling. And if you choose to support the show, you do get my betting tips that go on the Patreon, or you can support the show whatever dollar amount makes the most sense to you. Head on over there, take a look at it, and please support the show if you are so inclined. So we'll be back with a retrospective as always, and we also have a whiskey review that's kind of half in the can right now. I just have to do kind of the video slideshow element for it, but we have a whiskey review that's coming in honor of St. Patrick's Day. I'm probably going to drop that maybe middle of the week. St. Patrick's Day is on the 17th, so we're going to drop that middle of the week, probably Thursday, and then obviously we'll have the retrospective either Saturday night, depending on the end time, or Sunday morning. So until I speak with you again next time on that retrospective or whiskey review, whichever you listen to first, happy fight picking.